Hello, welcome to podcast episode 6. I'm really excited about this episode because I've just edited the interview with Stu Brown, and I think it's really cool, and I think you're gonna love it. We're two drummers talking about drumming together, drumming influences. But there's a lot of other stuff in there about how the Scottish jazz scene has evolved and just, So if that's your kind of thing, and you're interested in two people talking about stuff and getting into the detail, this is a good podcast for you. I've got a few letters come in, but I have to say we need more letters. So if you're watching this podcast, please can you... obviously, only if you like it. But if you like it and you want to help and support, you could send in a message or a letter or a question, or you could review us on, Apple Podcast app, or put a comment on YouTube, or subscribe on any of these things. Tweet about it if you're on Twitter. Any of these things will help the podcast. Got some letters in. First of all, a couple of messages from Brian Palmer. Now, if you've watched the Playtime podcast before, you'll know that there was a serious incident when I was trying to read out a message from Brian Palmer from Islay, and I was reading it out to Mario, and I asked him not to reveal his surname to preserve his anonymity. And at that moment, Mario started looking at his phone, and he was trying to multitask. And we all know that middle-aged men, especially married middle-aged men, cannot multitask. And so he was looking at the phone, trying to have a conversation with me. I said to him, "Don't say the surname." And he was going, "Yeah, And then he immediately said the surname because he wasn't concentrating. And I got angry with him. So this is a follow-up message by Brian Palmer from Islay. He says, T, I'm pretty sure that mentioning my name on the podcast has just doubled my street cred, for which many thanks, B. So that's why I'm now referring to him as Brian Palmer, because he seems to be happy about being outed as a Playtime podcast listener. He sent a follow-up message after the last Harry Weir gig, which was really cool, I think. And he said, T, not my particular musical scene, so to speak, though I can appreciate its qualities. However, you've cracked it as far as the audio and the visuals are concerned. Far better than a lot of live music audio available online. Take the rest of the week off. B. So thank you very much, Brian Palmer, for that fantastic feedback. And I tried to take the rest of the week off. Didn't work, but I appreciated very much the sentiment. We got another message in because Harry Weir live stream, if you go and watch it, I might put a little clip just now to illustrate this point for those watching on video. Matt was trying out having a camera in black and white. So we've got this message in saying, the Harry Weir gig was very interesting. What a mixture of sounds and styles. Not sure about the black and white camera pointed at you. This was addressed to me, by the way. In black and white, when playing the drums, you look like a baby hippo going through someone's bins at night, caught on their infrared CCTV. That's from my mum. Thanks, Mum. Next up, we've got Caroline Finn, who is actually the Playtime Audience Member of the Year for 2023. So I'm going to put a photo up. We took a photo of her with the band since she got her award. Should be there now in the video. We're going to put it on Instagram and Facebook. And she listened back to a clip of Gilgamesh, which is something like the emergence of Gilgamesh, which is from the George Burt gig. I'm going to play a little bit of it under this section because we put it on Facebook, and she said this: I listened to this, i.e. the whole Gilgamesh track, and it felt completely different rewatching the recording to being there. It was really immersive, like the Apocalypse Now of music. So that's quite something. The Apocalypse Now of music. I'm not going to ask who she thinks is Marlon Brando character. Colonel something. Because I've got a fear that I am the Marlon Brando character, and I don't want to be that guy. I'd be happy to be the Martin Sheen character, or any Vietnamese person. Anyway, one more message from Karen Green, who is in the States, and she is the mother of John Green, the wonderful composer and trumpet player, who's playing with us at the end of March. And she's kind of tuned in since we did a gig with John in lockdown, and she was responding to the Playtime gig where the four of us did some new works, and I did one of my tunes from 35 years ago, including a tune called Yellows. It's plural, Karen. Yellows, because of blues, because of the blues. It's plural, and Yellows is the name of the tune. So she kind of got it as a singular yellow, but wrote yellow, great tune, nice switch from straight to swing. I hope I heard this correctly. I think she meant I hope I heard this correctly. Whatever. I love it. Karen, thank you so much. That's wonderful. And thank you for creating John Green. There were presumably other people involved in that, but you were probably the main. We all know you were the main person. That's what John told me. Not in so many words, but that's the kind of impression I got. So thank you so much for your support for my 35-year-old composing. I might have played a little clip from that under this section, just because. And that's it. So final thing is, at the end of Stu Brown's interview, to finish off the podcast, we've been working on our album of improvisations we did during lockdown over the internet with a whole range of super interesting people from different parts of the world, and we're going to start previewing some tracks from that album. So we're going to play a track that we did with Laura Jurd, the amazing trumpet player. She was in a flat, we were all in our houses. It was during full lockdown, and we found a way to play improvised music together despite the latency, and I think it's a really cool piece of music. So I hope you really enjoy it. It's a super exclusive preview. So here we go. Here is the interview with Stu Brown. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Playtime podcast, Stu Brown.
So is this the interview? I thought we were going to talk about what we were going to do at Playtime. Are we going to discuss this live in the podcast?
I completely forgot about that.
That's because we don't even have a plan for the gig yet. So maybe the audience can witness.
You sent a really load of cool ideas. I'm just going to find them on my phone.
Like what I really think is going to be fun is just to find a bunch of approaches and stuff, things that would be really fun and really drum led for us that would allow us to explore that. And
I love that idea about referencing different drummers from different styles.
It doesn't have to be, I just want to say, like, I don't think it has to be like us doing the history of the drum kit and jazz drumming. I think it could be stuff from different eras and different influences, but things that are significant to us maybe, like, as well. So we could do something super early, but
we could do a New Orleans. Are you into a New Orleans vibe?
Totally, yeah.
So that would be a fun thing to do, like a second line thing. And Mario's all over that as well. So I'm totally into the Tony Allen, totally. Yeah. So I even have a photo of him on my Drum Hero wall.
So at the moment we've got New Orleans, we've got some kind of Afrobeat thing maybe. I mean, the thing is, there's like even those like You know that Tony Allen did like moaning as an Afrobeat thing, didn't he?
Yeah,
Stuff like that. Like,
actually, I covered that with African Groove Machine.
Right. I mean,
and I love it. I love the bridge when he just refuses to play swing.
Yeah,
I'm not playing swing.
Yeah.
Oh, Blakey, yeah, great, but I'm not playing actual swing.
yeah. I was just throwing that out there, but maybe it's more fun to do something that's like actually like a Tony Allen track or a Fela Kuti or something.
Well, I was wondering if you heard that album with Hugh Masekela.
Oh, I'm not sure.
It's fairly recent before he died, and did he? I think Hugh Masekela died as well. It's called Rejoice. It's basically Hugh Masekela and Tony, and it's some young London guys like Elliot Galvin and Steve Williamson's on it, sounding amazing, like fantastic. There's some really great tunes on there, and the other thing about it for Tony's side of things is he's recorded like a jazz drummer, so you can just hear everything. It's beautifully recorded, like the fella stuff you can't really hear. He's so in the mix you can't really hear. And I think that would be a great thing to do a double drum thing on.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like some stuff might be cool to do, but it might not suit the vibe or the lineup.
Well, they can go f themselves too, them. They have to fit around us.
Yeah. And I mean, just while we're on it, I think doing at least one thing that's just me and you, or having some really extended intros or duets within stuff would be great.
They have to leave the stage.
Yeah. And those things could be we can think of what those will be if they're based on anything, or if we just have a vibe about them and we just let them be really open. But
brilliant. I'm getting even more excited now than just talking about it. It's great. I mean, you said this thing about drum duo recordings. That's a really cool idea, because I actually haven't listened to a lot.
An obvious thing is like Ornette Coleman double quartets and stuff like that. But I think that stuff is actually free. One of my favorite duos is actually Joey Barron's duo with his partner, who's a classical percussionist. Have you heard that stuff?
No.
There's an amazing gig that he basically got stuck in Germany during the lockdown, and his partner is this woman, and I've gone completely blank on her name, but I ended up having Joey Barron was like my big influence when I was a kid. I was massively into his stuff, and
me too.
And I suddenly found out that I saw this duo stuff, and like I found this website, and basically he didn't really have a web presence at all, Joey Barron. No social media, nothing really. But his partner was like, look, we're doing this duo thing. And also he was stuck during the lockdown. So she basically put an email address up for him and like said, Joey's available for creative consultation lessons or something like that. And I was like, wow, a chance to like get a lesson with Joey Barron.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, it was lockdown, so it was like an online thing, but
okay.
I mentioned it, and then my mum and my partner got me this kind of session with Joey Barron as a Christmas present. And
guess what? I had a lesson with him as well.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
right.
In New York.
I mean, I guess for me, like, I had heard this. This is like jumping to more of the present time, but I'd found this thing on Spotify. Every so often, I'll just look and see if Joey Barron is on any new recordings and check out what he's doing. and there was this thing that was very percussive and weird, and I didn't really know what it was or like who the other person was. And then then during the lockdown, they did this amazing broadcast, and it's kind of like mostly improvised, but with some preconceived.
Okay, that sounds
approaches.
Cool. Yeah.
And because she comes from this classical, but he's just playing a jazz drum kit like he always does. But she's got like a kind of stand-up set of all these different pitched drums and things all around her, and playing more like a classical multi-percussion setup. And this improvised thing they did during the lockdown, we watched it using our projector at home through our sound system. Wow. And it was like happening in real time, and we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, but anyway, yeah, I had that lesson with them. And the funny thing about it was he was like, oh man, yeah, you need to give me a call, and I need to be sure that this person, like, you know what you're getting, and this is not like a drum lesson, this is like a creative consultation sort of thing, and I need to know that the person, like, I don't want anyone to waste money, and she's like, no, we're sure. So she was on the phone to him and everything, and then I had some email chat with him beforehand and sent him some links to what I was doing, and by the time he came on the call, he was like, oh man, me and my partner, we've been checking out this visual triggering stuff you're doing. And he was like, it's so amazing, like, we're super into it, like, you need to keep us in the loop about what you're doing, we're like, right. We're super into this. And I was like, okay, right.
Well, it is super cool, all that stuff. It's really super cool. I had a lesson with him in New York about when I was about, I don't know, in my late 20s, I think. So okay. It's getting on for 30 years ago now.
Right. Okay. Right.
And I was really into, the Zorn, stuff to do with Zorn and Bill Frisell.
Yeah, me too.
And I can't remember exactly. I think I went to see a gig in New York in this church, and it was with Bill Frisell and Kermit Driscoll and Joy Barron and that sort of band. They would play together for a lot of time, those guys. And I went up to him after the gig and said, I'm in town, can I get a lesson? And he said, yeah, sure. And we sort of kind of met up somewhere, and it was like whatever, $50 for an hour. He stayed with me for 2 hours.
Same with me as well.
He didn't charge me any more. Super lovely guy. And he had that kind of sort of I was going, how do you play so many different styles so well? It's like you fucking motherfucker at this, and you're absolutely authentic at this. And he was just like, I used to play with the radio a lot when I was a kid, and I used to play everything. And but he was one of those lessons where he just made me feel like this guy wasn't a different species to me. He was just further down the road. He was kind of just a really, really cool, lovely, interesting guy that loved playing the drums.
And he also told me, like most of us, he was like, I didn't set out to play this noisy stuff with John Zorn. Like, he was like, if I get time to practice, what I love is listening to piano players. And he mentioned a few piano players he was super into. He's like, I just like to listen to their phrasing and try and copy their phrasing. So yeah, I do play all that other stuff, but really, my love is just to swing and like play phrases and
yeah, because he's sort of jazzer, really, isn't he? He's a jazzer. He's a proper jazzer.
Even that I didn't really know, because there's not much out there about him. He's like kind of off the radar in terms of there's not a lot of interviews, or you can't really find video footage of masterclasses or anything like that. Not much, anyway. So that was why it was more interesting to chat to. I think my mind would have been blown if I'd had a lesson with him in my teens or 20s, but like I'm now further down the line, so it was a different experience. And although I don't consider myself on the same level, it was really flattering for him to be interested at all in what I was doing.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But it still felt like I'd fulfilled a kind of life goal by getting to chat with this guy.
Bucket list thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much a lesson because he was like, "Oh man, I don't really have a proper setup here. I've just got this laptop next to the drums. It sounds shit." And like I wouldn't charge somebody and claim it was a lesson. I can play something for you if you want, but you'll hear it won't sound good. And so he was like, so we just had a lot. I just asked him a lot of questions, about his approach, and it was partly to do with this. For me, it was to do with his commitment to an idea, or like just the way that he's so deliberate and the sound and the dynamic, and I don't just.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about, because I haven't actually listened to him playing. I haven't listened to him for a while, and I was really, I listened to him a lot, and had a lesson with him, and it's interesting thinking about his playing. Is there something really? There's a real sort of intent in what he plays. It's just like he plays, and it just is what it is, and it's so boom, it's pure. It's really great. It's something great about him.
There's certain drummers that when they play, they might just hit a kick drum and a cymbal together, and there's just something about Brian Blade. I find the same way.
Yeah.
And there's a few certain albums where, like Elvin, like the certain things where you just hear somebody, or Steve Jordan, like somebody just like the commitment, though, the intent with which they're just doing something is like so much greater than everything else that someone else plays. Just that one. Yeah. No, has more.
You can notate it as like a crotchet and it just doesn't capture anything like the meaning of what they're doing in a certain context. And it's partly why they're not playing as well. It's like the choices they're making, and just.
Well, to me, it's like they've completely removed. Although they think about music deeply, when they're playing, it feels like that barrier between the mental thought process of playing music and the actual doing has been kind of removed, and it's just like they're just like a vessel of, like, the music's just kind of coming through them. And in a lot of, I feel like especially now, you hear a lot of the playing you hear can be a little bit contrived at times. I don't know. I'm going to correct myself there, because saying something like thing you hear nowadays makes me sound like I'm an old git, and I'm actually.
How old are you, Stu?
Old, yeah. I'm
no,
47.
You're not
47.
as old as me.
47.
Yeah, I'm old enough to be your father if we were.
If you got started young.
No, if we were like gerbils or hamsters or something. Now, I'd be old enough to be your grandfather if we were hamsters, because I'm 56.
Well, I know that you're enough older than me that you were able to play gigs down at the old 13th Note basement on Glassford Street when I was still at school, and I would get in underage to try and watch you play. So, but I knew that, I knew the age difference wasn't great, but like there's just enough of a divide to.
I was able to drink legally, and you were,
I'm not,
Yeah, that was actually a important. I think that was an important phase, because, and a lot of it was down to Ian Copeland.
And for me, I'm talking about before Ian Copeland.
Really?
When it was Jim Waugh from Clyde FM.
Was it? Because I always thought it was Ian that did that.
When I first went to those gigs, there was a jazz show on Clyde FM radio, and it was this guy Jim Waugh, and he ran Basement Jazz, and then he passed away, and Ian had been playing those nights, and then Ian took over the nights. I don't know exactly
when it happened,
how the transition happened, and whether it was immediate, but Ian took on that name and kept the nights alive after Jim Waugh passed away. But when I first went to, Ian was playing there, but he wasn't running the night. And then it moved around, went to the Ram's Horn, which was always hilarious because it was called Basement Jazz, and it was up. You went up some stairs. It was like an Escher version of Basement Jazz.
The thing is that what I remember was that when Ian took it over, he started promoting Scottish jazz musicians as though they were cool, and whereas prior to that, it had always been like, you know, incoming musicians were cool, and there's a sort of Scottish band on supporting, or you know, and he really just there was this sort of, this is fucking cool and it's Scottish, and fucking happening, and it was that whole period. It was like there was something about really changing how we saw ourselves as a scene, and I think he did a really important thing there, because
it's fun. Yeah. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, you know, and you know, I think it's gone a long way since then, but I think that was this, for me anyway, that was the start of something. You just going, fuck this, let's just celebrate ourselves no matter what. You know, you could, you know.
It's really interesting to hear you talking about it from your perspective. So I would have been maybe 15, 16 when all that was, before Ian took it over. So I must have been like, around that, in my teens still when he took over. But you guys were having that experience of it. And my experience was somebody coming to uni, trying to get jazz gigs, trying to play jazz gigs. And I had a band and stuff, but we were young, and people wouldn't take us that seriously in the jazz scene, and Ian included. And since then, like, you know, I know Ian really well. We're good pals. And but when I was starting out, maybe we weren't good, I don't know, but we struggled to get into that scene, and we felt excluded from it.
Okay.
And I used to come and watch it and really enjoy the gigs, but we felt we were kind of shut out of it. So that there's always a generational thing of like people's perception of their own generation. And so I think things are quite healthy at the moment, but there's still these weird divides that people don't even realize. So at that time, the only way that we could play live with a jazz band was we got ourselves on the same bill as, like, basically I was on the same uni course as the drummer from a band called the Blisters, which went on to become Franz Ferdinand, or the singer from Franz Ferdinand.
Where were you at uni?
Glasgow at that time. I was doing electronics with music at Glasgow, and and so this drummer was like, "Oh, come down and see my band." You actually
studied proper electronics?
Yeah, I've got an electrical engineering degree.
Yeah, so you know what a
an op amp is,
what a diode is and stuff.
Well, yeah, I did, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah,
I did. I designed and built a wireless MIDI interface for use with dancers when there was nothing like that in the market as a final year project. But then we were maybe going to take it to market, and then I went to Berklee instead, and threw my career down the toilet and playing jazz.
You could have been rich.
Maybe.
No, you're not going to get rich making a wireless MIDI interface.
No.
You'd be fucking cool though.
Yeah, but yeah, it's that time when those gigs were going on and we couldn't get a look in because we were kind of young and I don't know, maybe not established enough. So I kind of befriended all these people in the Glasgow kind of experimental indie scene, and we ended up just playing on the same bill as all these bands. And the Riot Girl movement was quite big at that time, so there was like all female kind of punk bands, and there were bands like the Yummy Fur and the predecessors to Franz Ferdinand and all those bands. We would just play our weird jazz on the same bill as those bands. Also at the 13th Note.
Who was in the band with you?
So it was me, Graeme Wilson,
okay,
Alan Wiley on trumpet, a guy called Dave Murray on guitar, who went on to form D.S. Murray Quartet.
Yeah.
And on bass, Neil Cameron, an Irish bass player.
That rings a bell.
And various other people would dep and at different times, but yeah, we just all wrote tunes and contributed them, and like we would just do kind of weird stuff, and like sometimes we would bring in, like, we had a dancer in one thing, and we just do like, and the funny thing is, because we were presented like on the same bill as these indie bands, some of whom were also quite off the wall, people would really go kind of wild for what we were doing in a different way than a jazz crowd, and we just kind of kept doing it. So,
yeah, it sounds cool. But I mean, I think there's always been sort of gatekeepers in the Scottish jazz scene, and if you the thing about gatekeepers, if the gate is open for you, you kind of like them, and if the gate is closed, it's like a different. it's like a binary experience. So for some people, the gate is closed, and for many years, there's been not enough diversity of gatekeepers. So
I agree with that. Yeah, but I also think that like the current scene, certainly in Glasgow, that's formed around like the glitch nights and lay low and all like RCS students and people who've been up to studied elsewhere or not studied but have come together. That kind of DIY approach of like, let's just put on our own now, and then that thing's really grown, and that's exactly what we were doing at that time as well. Because and it's really nice to see, except they've taken it a step further and are being more successful with it than we were, I think. But it's also just chatting to that generation of players like Harry Weir, who you've got playing at Playtime. We were chatting to him because I had a project with him with a rapper, and he was like, oh, you know, it's really interesting now because, you know, the jazz scene is so young in Scotland, and the hip hop scene is so young that, you know, I think they're only just starting to cross over. And I said, well, you know, we were actually playing with rappers. I used to play like electronic drums, like sample drums and stuff live with a hip hop crew, early 2000s, late 90s. And he was like, you did? And then I was like, oh yeah, like the guys from Black and Eyes. And he's like, who's Black and Eyes? And then we were in the car and I was able to play him some of the stuff, and he was like, whoa, this sounds like it could have been made last week. And I was like, well, I don't know about that, but he was like, wow, I really want to check this out now. I had no idea there was kind of history.
Funny, I had a similar thing with Harry when he played with Playtime on the live stream. We did an interview, and he said something very similar, that the Scottish jazz scene's kind of, it's like just starting to kind of try and get into the international scene. And I was kind of going, hey? But what was interesting about it afterwards, because I sort of said, I think there's been people trying to do it for like a long time, but you may not be aware of it. But I actually think I was exactly the same when I was, you know, early 20s. I thought there wasn't a Scottish jazz scene, and we were the first people to try, you know. And then looking back, that wasn't actually true, and it was kind of like it was based on my limited knowledge of what had happened before. And I think that's part of the beauty of renewal, is that people kind of arrive on a scene and are just totally going for it and doing it in like fresh minds. But there's also this sense of, you know, there is a history here, and people have been doing stuff, and some of it's pretty cool, you know, and but also there's challenges, there's sort of structural challenges to being successful based here, which you guys would benefit from understanding how these things went in the past.
Well, I mean, when I made that comment, it was in no way judgmental, and actually, what was nice about it was like I was able to, like, in Harry's case, he was like genuinely interested and was like, "Oh, I didn't know about this."
He's a brilliant guy. He's a brilliant guy.
So, yeah, and I'm just thinking,
he also looks a little bit. My mother saw a photo of him and said, "Is that you?" And I was going, "No, he's much younger and more photogenic than me." But there's a sort of family resemblance thing going on.
Right. I mean, I've been watching some of the Jazz Archive sort of interviews with like Ronnie Ray and Fionna Duncan and people, and it's been really, some of those were really interesting because I filled in some gaps in my knowledge, and maybe there's space in that archive maybe that needs to be filled for that kind of crossover, the various meetings of different music that were happening at different eras. But
that's a really good idea too. There should be a chat with like a couple from one generation and a couple of people from another generation, just sharing things.
Yeah. And also like people who are from the scenes outside of jazz, who've collaborated with jazz players at different time periods, coming in and talking about what it meant to them to connect around Henry's and places like that.
Right. I'll check out the Joe Barron and his partner duo.
I'll send you a link to this specific concert because it was so good.
Okay,
that's really great, and I think it could maybe give us some ideas as well. Of just I don't think we should copy them, but I think it's a beautiful example of two people just creating music in the moment together on drums.
They're obviously a romantic partnership. So do we need to do anything to establish that kind of connection before we perform?
I didn't know if they were partners until he told me. It wasn't completely apparent. I thought they were just musical partners until they're in that context. But I think we're fine.
Good answer.
This is like the foreplay. This is fine.
That's a Ghanaian drum. It's like
right.
These.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a bit softer than a djembe, and there's a beautiful 6/8. There's a beautiful 6/8 rhythm. So I could play that. You play kit with it. And then go into a tune would be kind of cool. Could be fun. We could get Mario to play cowbell
with a soft beater
with his foot. Do you play with Mario when he's playing cowbell with his foot? Because I won't let him do it.
When it's his band,
he can do it.
Yeah.
If he's paying me money, he can do it.
Yeah.
Any other situation, it's like, no fucking way, mate. I'll play bass pedals and see if you like that.
Yeah. Today he was in the rehearsal. At the end of the rehearsal, he was asking me to, Stu, man, I feel like this groove is rushing. Can you play it like, Joyce's husband, Toti Mourinho, he plays this groove and like Mario told me exactly the same thing in the same way when I was like 20 years old and like in a very school teacher way. And I was trying to say, he was like, come on, try it now. And it was like this samba in 7 at this kind of medium slow tempo. And he was trying to get me to play this really broken rhythm over a 7/4 foot pattern. So, like,
okay. That's easy.
Just like da da ga 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 da da, but with a boom 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 boom. And I was saying to him, and he was like, come on, Stu, just try it. It's going to work. It's going to really help just settle the groove. And I was like, Mario, like, can you stop telling me really specifically what I'm going to take a bit? No, let's just try it, Stu. I know this is going to work. And I was like, man, I was like, look, I'm going to have to do something slightly different because at that tempo, without filling in the subdivisions, it's going to be really fucking hard to play. It's not going to groove. It's going to be really hard to make it groove. And he's like, man, I know about this shit because, it's like, I felt like, oh man, I'm like back at college. It was quite.
Yeah, well, I mean, we probably do need to talk about Mario's. We both work a lot with him.
He's great. He's one of our closest friends, and
me too. Yeah, absolutely, and he's unbelievable. I've got a question.
Go for it.
Is it Stu or Stu, or both,
or Stuart even?
Well, no, it's Stuart. But if you're going to contract it. Is it Stu or Stu?
The thing is, people call me both. People call me all three. Stu, Stuart.
And it's written with STU.
Yeah. Which
suggests a stew, but it could be stew.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I use Stuart a lot. I use Stu at one point because a lot of friends were just calling me Stu. They were calling me Stu, but and then when I was putting together the Raymond Scott project band, I wanted to put my name in it, and it was already a really long band name.
Right.
And I was trying to buy a domain name at the time, and all the Stuart Browns I could find, like, were taken, all the .coms and things, so it was easier to get a Stu Brown website and a Stuart Brown. So I just started kind of like putting music out.
I mean, I think you're entitled to call yourself what the fuck you want.
But I do call myself what the fuck I want.
Do you ever talk to yourself? Come on, Stu. Stu. Yeah. And if you do, how do you pronounce your name?
I would say Stu, but other people say Stu. So.
Because I quite often go.
What would you say?
Well, I mean, there's only one way to pronounce Tom. Are you talking about Stu?
No, for me, yeah.
Well, I kind of get worried about things like that, so I start kind of going, oh, Stu, or I mean, like Una McGlone.
Yeah.
I have, Una or Una.
And Una, that's definitely Una.
Yeah. It's definitely Una, but then in the moment you forget which one it is, and then you.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. I'd probably call you Stu.
That's good.
But now that we've spoken, I'll try and go for Stu. The other thing that I was going to suggest for the gig is I'll bring my baran.
Okay. I'm wondering if maybe equally, like, we can both play drum kit, but if you're going to do some percussion at some point, maybe there's some other stuff that I can bring as well. Or
sure.
I'm not sure what exactly, but
well, don't feel under any need to do that.
I know, but I did think about it. Like, if I was going to bring something electronic, for example, if I had, it could be a melodic thing or something like. But I even thought about doing something percussive in a solo where we're a duo piece where we're not necessarily playing drum kit, but we're playing away from the drum kit percussively, play audience members, body percussion.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Baran. I mean, I'll probably bring a kind of standard 4-piece kit, but bring some extra weird shit, as if I would bring for like an improv gig or something. So there's other sounds and.
Have you done a lot of double drum stuff?
I have done some. I've done some with you.
Well, yeah. Well, I've
done some stuff with
as well.
I've done some stuff with definitely done plenty of stuff with percussion. In quite a few different groups. The double drum thing, I've only done it with a few people, and I found it worked really well with some people and not so well with others. I think the players have to complement each other, and that could be by being totally different, or it could be by having a similar approach. And some drummers, I won't say who, because it's not really to do with musicality, but there was one drummer in the Scottish jazz scene who's brilliant. But I did a double drum thing one night, and it just didn't work. It just because they had never thought about it. I think
yes,
they continued to play what they played brilliantly, but they didn't adapt to having me there, and therefore it was not enjoyable.
I played a lot with James McIntosh. Over about 15 years now. Sure. And we did about 10 to 12 years playing with McFall's Chamber, doing a set of Martin Bennett music and some Fraser Fifield music, and I absolutely loved playing with him. Although we've got very different time fields, so I'm a little bit in front, and he's a bit behind, but he also has this kind of perfect pitch for tempo, which I definitely don't have, and so he was constantly going, man, no, fucking hell, man. But
yeah.
I really loved playing with him. We're such different drummers.
Yeah.
But there was this thing we were doing this McFall's tour, and in the finale tune, I had some sort of a bag of free improv sort of toys, and some of them were like, stupid objects to play the drums with, like a lizard, and I had a baby.
Yeah, I remember the baby and the shark.
Yeah. Had a shark, and then each night of the tour, I would sort of plan. There was this point in the last tune where I would pull out an object and play it and try and throw James off try and throw him, and then we did a gig in Mull in Antoba, and I got him with a lobster, a plastic lobster. And I pulled out his lobster and hit the drums with it, and he just lost it because the whole tour he totally ignored my
Yeah.
stupidity, and then I finally fucked him with this lobster, and it was a fantastic moment. And
right, I'll see if I can throw you off with an object at playtime that you don't expect. Then we know.
Okay, well, challenge accepted. Challenge
Yeah.
accepted. I think we just nailed down the second drum duet right there.
I think we should. Yeah. Well, why don't we say that one drum duet is going to be like a really rhythmic kind of like thing based on some kind of groove or pattern, or it's going to have some kind of rhythmic feel to it, and the other one is going to be just mad. It's just whatever.
That's a deal.
It's fun.
Stuart Brown, that's a fucking deal.
Because I don't really. That's one thing I would want to interview you and like say, how did you get into it? And like, but I know we don't.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Maybe that's for another day. But
I think you can learn a lot about somebody by just going like, I heard this and this had a big impact.
I would love to do that. So let's
do this thing.
Get into. How did you get into music, drumming, improvised drumming, jazz? Tell me the story.
So I grew up in a household where there was always a lot of music playing, and my dad was a massive music fan. And so my first exposure to music was his record collection, really. Okay. And his record collection was kind of, he was really into Jimi Hendrix, a lot of Frank Zappa, a lot of jazz, Miles Davis. He didn't really like John Coltrane. That was a big thing.
Really? My dad didn't like Miles Davis.
Right, okay.
He called him Footle Lips. Footle Lips. He can't play the trumpets. Footle Lips. We're going, nah.
Yeah, it was weird. He loved Mingus and Monk and all sorts of stuff, but Coltrane didn't click with him. And he was also like into some like Kraftwerk and all that, and there was some Stravinsky in that record collection as well.
Wow.
Sounds pretty cool. All sorts of other things, as well as all my kiddie records. So like I guess at some point I had this realization that the reason that I don't really separate genres is because, or I do separate them, but I just play music. I don't really think I'm a jazz drummer or a whatever drummer, is partly because of the way I grew up with music. Was there was just all these records in this record cabinet, right. And I had like the Muppet Show album next to Kraftwerk next to, and if I heard a song, like to me, like We Are the Robots by Kraftwerk just sounded like another Sesame Street song, but a bit electronic to me, or something like that. So it all just kind of jumbled into one thing. And I think I kind of carried that through the rest of my actual professional musical life. But anyway, my dad was always taking us to gigs and stuff. And so I remember
going to do as a job. You told me this the other day.
My dad is he's passed away now, but he was an astronomer, and he started at Glasgow University, studied there, went on to become a lecturer, and eventually head of his department, and then became Astronomer Royal for Scotland. So we got to travel quite a lot as a family when he was working at another university in a research position. And that also meant while we were traveling, sometimes we got to experience music as well. So I think...
Where did you go to?
US and Holland.
Did you live there for a while?
Yeah, I lived in the US for 6 months and went to school there at the end of primary school.
Amazing.
In Wisconsin. And my kind of memory of how I got into drumming was that on one of these trips, I'm pretty sure what happened was I heard an American marching band, like a college marching band, where it wasn't like the marching bands that I was familiar with. It was like, I don't know what they were playing because I was too young to know, but that kind of James Brown
funky
vibe
thing.
Or something funky that I'd just seen all these drummers together. It somehow stuck with me, and apparently I just went on about what I want to learn drums. And
you were like, what, 10, 9 or 10?
I was 7 or 8.
Okay. I was 7 when I started playing.
And I talked about it a lot. And then my grandfather was really good friends with Heather Corbett, who was the principal percussionist for BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra.
Wow, okay.
And after a year of me going on about this, he basically said, look, why don't we get him some lessons? And because she's like a serious classical percussionist, you know, if he's not serious about it, either he'll click with it or she'll scare him off, one or the other kind of thing. And so I started these lessons with her, and I stuck at it. And
were they kit lessons or just percussion?
No, I started off with a practice pad and a glockenspiel, which I was not totally enamored with. But the thing that she got me into really early on was she got me going along to a wind ensemble after 6 months and just playing like bass drum and stuff. And very quickly, some of the other percussionists who were older left, and I was suddenly stuck on my own. I think
in the wind ensemble.
Yeah, I was like 9, 10, and I suddenly had to do everything myself. I was stuck in a drum kit and I had to cover all the parts. And I used to get.
Was it stressful?
I got real anxiety and like stomach cramps and stuff because I was sort of. But it did throw me in at the deep end at a really young age. And then when I was 10, I got a secondhand drum kit from the drum shop in Glasgow. And she wasn't a kit player at all, and she tried to show me some drum kit, but I now realize that my slowness in progressing with drum kit might have been me, or it might have been that she wasn't really a drum kit player. So I switched teacher when she had some health issues, and to someone who was Ian Muir, who was a much more of a drum kit player, and he was closer in age to me as well, in his 20s at the time, and he introduced me. He got me listening to a lot of like Schofield, and it was him that first played me John Schofield.
Wow!
And some of those Joey Barron things actually. But he also got me really into like all the grunge stuff that was like, he got me into Primus and Soundgarden and God knows what else. So early Red Hot Chili Peppers and things like that. So I was kind of like, he opened a big door to me in terms of music. So, and throughout that time, probably like 13 years old, I started playing in Strathclyde not Strathclyde Youth Jazz Orchestra, but Strathclyde Arts Centre Jazz Band. It was originally called Glasgow Arts Centre Jazz Band, and it was run by John Gourley. Callum Gourley's dad. And it was this very.
He's a brilliant guy. I've worked with him.
Yeah,
he's an amazing guy with, and he's also a very good composer as well.
Yeah, so he was brilliant because he just was really inclusive and really encouraging, and I ended up like writing a couple of big band charts, and I didn't know how to write big band charts, but I said, "Can I write a tune for the band?" He was like, "Yeah," and I brought stuff along, and we would play the tunes on gigs, and I'm sure there were all sorts of things wrong with it, but
How old were you when you did that?
I don't know, like 15 or something, maybe 14, 15. Yeah. And I was kind of self-taught with all that stuff. I didn't really, I just had a keyboard at home, and I'd been learning tune percussion. And I knew about music theory from school. So I just kind of used my ear and tried to work stuff out.
I did the same thing because I was in the Edinburgh School's big band.
Yeah,
and I think Tommy played in it for a point, and Phil was in it at the time when I was in it. I was about 14, and I got so much shit off the trumpet players for not being good enough and everything. And then one day I tried to write a chart for it, and I got all the transpositions wrong, and they played it. It sounded horrendous, and it's like I didn't know that you had to put the trumpets in or something stupid like that.
Yeah,
it sounded horrendous, and everyone kind of looked at me like I was a fucking moron. But it was start of something, you know.
Yeah. Also, at that point, you know, this like we didn't have Sibelius, so it was all handwritten, and you had the hand position and all that, like and then handwriting all the parts for everyone.
All the parts.
It was I mean, whatever age I was, whether it was 14 or 15, I can't quite remember, but you know, it was a lot. It was a hell of a lot of work.
But you did it, and so that means you are really heading that direction. How did you choose music as a career? And you said you went to Glasgow, so talk me through that.
Well, I just always did a lot of music, and I did a lot of art, a lot of drawing, and I used to do a lot of wood carving and making puppets and all kinds of stuff. I was just always doing kind of creative things, but and wanted to pursue something in the arts, I think, but my parents were, like most parents, were a bit dubious about that, and didn't think it was a very sensible career path. So they were trying to encourage me to do something more academic, and so there was that kind of, is there a course that you could do that would combine the arts with something more academic because you're good at sciences and maths and English or whatever? So I kind of ended up by default picking out a couple of courses that tick those boxes. It wasn't really what I wanted to do at the time exactly. It was more a compromise, I think, looking back on it. But through going to Glasgow Uni and meeting other people who were who a lot of them were like me. They were people who'd been in that situation. They were good at music, but they'd done well at school. So they were trying to find a route. And what happened was I kind of got involved in playing a lot in the Glasgow music scene, even if it wasn't a jazz scene. And I learned quite a lot about software synthesis and studio techniques and things and electronics. And I didn't really put any of that to use in music that much until a bit later, but it kind of gave me that understanding and interest. So I went through that course thinking that I would come out of it.
So this was electronics with electronic
music. So it was taught between the electronics department and the music department in Glasgow.
That's an amazing combination. It's a kind of combination.
It sounds cool, but it was essentially in the electronics department, we were getting taught by people who designed the Intel processor. And we were like, wow, well, I've got, even if I find this lecture quite boring, I've got to respect this guy because he was, he's got some credibility. And then you would go to the music department and somebody would drone on for a while about romantic music, and it would all be a bit. It
wasn't connected up.
It wasn't. Yeah, they hadn't really thought it through, and there were some classes were connected, but there was a lot of just add-on stuff that didn't really have any relationship at all, and wasn't really useful. The music department at that time was quite old-fashioned and backwards. So, and the electronics department was quite. It was moving forwards because it was, it's still an evolving thing all the time. But yeah, I got through that course, and I was thinking about taking my final year project to market, which was this wireless MIDI interface.
Yeah.
But at that time, and I wasn't at all thinking of a career in music. I was thinking maybe get a job in something music related in the electronics field, but maybe play gigs on the side and just keep it up as a hobby. That was the thought. But then Tommy Smith ran this Berklee in Glasgow course it was a week-long course, and it was the first one in the UK as far as I know. So people came from all over the UK to this week-long course, and they were offering some scholarships to 5 people. And at the end of the week, I unexpectedly got this scholarship offer. It was me, Alan Kosker, Paul Towndrow, Alan Brown, another drummer, and Frank Harrison, who's from Cambridge, amazing piano player, plays with Gilad Atzman and various other people. And Graeme Stephen also got a scholarship at that week, but it was a slightly smaller, it wasn't as good, no, I'm joking. He got this summer kind of short program scholarship. So anyway, I finished the degree after that, and I kind of had this.
That was to go to America and study at Berklee.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a bit of a crossroads of like, do I stay here and try and pursue something with this final year project and develop it? And also, John Gourley at that time very kindly recommended me for a teaching job, which I walked straight into out of uni. So I got this teaching job and had this thing on the side, but also this scholarship. And I was kind of going around in circles, like, what am I going to do? And eventually I just thought, I never thought I would have a chance to go to Berklee. That's something that other people do. I never really saw myself that way. So I just thought maybe it's too good an opportunity to miss. So I managed to get some more funding together and went over there for the year.
How old were you at that point?
So I just graduated. I just turned 21 when I went there, and went for 2 semesters. And
how was it for you? Because I'm aware that some people, I've known quite a few people have been, and some people had obviously a positive experience, and some people were quite disappointed with it. and it felt the expression kind of sausage machine or whatever.
Yeah,
it was like kind of an elite, and then a lot of people paying lots of money and getting kind of rammed through. Was
well, yeah,
how it's been described to me, but I don't know.
well, the truth, I think there's a lot of truth in what you said, although I would maybe phrase it slightly differently. Though, like at the time that I went, and I think this has changed now. At the time that I went, if you had enough money, you could go there, even if you weren't good. And there were a lot of examples of people there who just had rich parents who paid them there, and they weren't even going to half their lessons. They weren't great players. But to give you an idea, there were about 700 or 800 guitarists there at any one time, and about 500 drummers at any one time.
Yeah, right.
So if you think about it,
that's nuts.
Within that group of drummers, we had people like Antonio Sanchez and Anthony Parks and
Stu Brown.
But there were a lot of like Kendrick Scott. A lot of people who are big names now. Like Jaleel Shaw was there at sax, and like there were a lot of people. Miguel Zenon, sax player, was in an ensemble with me. There's a lot of people there that are like now incredible. Dana Stevens, I don't know if you know him, great tenor player, was like one of my best friends there, and we played like the person I did all my playing with while I was there. We hung out all the time. So there were these people that like have gone on to be like world-renowned international stars in the jazz scene. But then there were all these people you just never heard about and never met because they just weren't at that level. So when you say there was an elite, I would say more, it wasn't like an elite as if they were like up themselves or
there were some people
just that there were some
people who were really talented.
Yeah, there were people who went there with not knowing how to play jazz, and they went out knowing how to play jazz according to the Berklee formula. And then there were amazing players that went to Berklee because they were already good and to connect with other people and get with some really, because there's some amazing teachers there. And if you can get with those teachers and get into those good ensembles, then you're going to get a lot.
If you meet a young Scottish drummer who's like you, who's 18, 19, what do you say to them about going to college? Where do you suggest they go now?
I mean, the price of somewhere like Berklee has gone up so much now that I don't know how anyone can afford it. But like when I went, it was $6,500 per semester, and most of that was paid by scholarship money for me. I just had to subsidize it a little bit and some living costs. But now I don't know what it is, but I know it's
a lot,
10 times that or something. But I really don't know. I think it depends on. I think it really depends on the drummer. I personally, I don't think I know enough about what all the colleges are like now. My advice to a young drummer would be nothing to do with the education system. I think it would be. I think you learn a lot about, like, our paths are probably quite. What's the word? It's like, if you trace back how you got to where you are now and how you're doing all the different things that you're doing, it's a very complicated series of coincidences, and going to Berklee was just
one of the
trigger.
You would have always ended up here anyway, no matter what. You would have always
no. I think going to Berklee made me give music a shot as a career.
Okay.
And it made me take it more seriously. And maybe, although I felt there were a lot of people that were just ridiculously good there, so you felt always far away from the top ranking in some ways. But there were enough good players there that made nice comments about what I was playing that gave me some confidence to come back and think, oh, maybe I have something here. And actually, a drummer friend of mine over there always sticks with me. And other people have said things like this, that this guy said to me after a class where I just could not get this coordination thing that everyone else was getting. I was like, how is everyone playing this? He turned around to me and went, you might not be like the most technically amazing drummer. And I went, oh, thanks very much. But you're such a creative drummer that I think you're always gonna have work. And I've since
you got so much work. It's great.
I've since met up with this guy, and he ended up. I don't know what he's doing now, but last time I met him, he was not making a living from playing drums, and he didn't even have any gigs. And I think a lot of people, I think that's a big bit of advice. Is like you could be the best, technically brilliant or most accomplished player, but that's not really going to get you.
It doesn't get you hard. It's the music that gets you hard. It's the time and the groove and also not being a dick.
Yeah, and just like bringing something to the table that, and for me, it's I don't know. But I think we're similar in that way. Is like we both make music as well as playing drums, and just looking behind you at your collection of stuff, like you can see the same here. It's like we both kind of accumulate sounds and noise making things, and when people hire Tom Bancroft or Stu Brown, or like they're not just hiring somebody because they've got a nice feel. They're like, they know you're going to bring some interesting textures and sounds and approaches and adapt to each situation.
Yeah, hopefully.
Or maybe not.
Listen,
maybe you do the same every time.
Well, it's fucking. I feel like we keep talking for another hour easily. You know, there's so many things to talk about that we haven't got onto, and I'm gonna have to go because
me too.
I'm gonna get yelled at any second, but really excited about doing a double drum gig with you, and in between now and then, let's exchange some tracks and you know, I'd be really up for it becoming something beyond that as well. So, wonderful. It's been really, really nice to talk to you about this stuff. Because there's something about these kind of conversations that I'm obviously there for an audience, but you end up finding stuff out that you wouldn't find out in the pub necessarily if you're just sort of having a chat and catching up.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's really, really so nice to kind of dive a bit deeper into where someone's come from, you know.
Yeah, and I've said it to you before, but like at that time that I was checking out people like Joey Byron and stuff and getting really influenced and copying stuff, I was also coming to see you, and I think at that time you hadn't quite. I mean, I saw the Orange Ear Ensemble in the old Athenaeum in Glasgow. I remember that vividly. And I was wondering about that tune. I'll see if I can remember. There's a tune that you played that night. It was by a saxophone player whose name I've completely forgotten.
It would be it's one of the World Saxophone Quartet.
No, it wasn't that. No, it's I have the album and CD if I can open a box of CDs. Oh God, right. I've gone off on a tangent there, but I was going to say, coming to see you play back at that time was also quite influential to me because you stood out as someone that was doing these kind of like different, sometimes wacky things, but always creative in some way. And there were a lot of, you know, as a younger musician, you do get older musicians saying, you need to respect the tradition, and you need to play this way and blah, blah, blah. And it was just great to see an example of someone that wasn't so much older than me, just doing something a bit more off the wall and different, setting an example of, no, it doesn't have to be that way. It can also be this way. And, but yeah, you were still doing gigs with some of the straight ahead people as well. And the one tiny little thing about what we said earlier is just, I wanted to credit the older generation of like Fionna, Duncan, Ronnie, Ray, and because
Tony McClellan, man, yeah, absolutely.
When I was coming up, one thing about that youth jazz band was that older players, we would sometimes go and sit in and play double bills with older big bands and things like that. So we were exposed to a lot of older players, and the kind of younger generation, like your generation, initially it felt like a bit of a closed sort of like secret like jazz society that we didn't know how to get into. But the older generation that were actually really kind of like had a more open door policy of like, come in and if you know, we'll give you advice, you know, if you're rubbish, we'll tell you. But like, you could sit in and play, and there was a sort of I really appreciated, like, especially I used to play with Fionna Duncan a lot on Monday nights on her jam session and stuff, and they were just all. I mean, the money was terrible, but
yeah, no, she's amazing. Is it? By the way, before we move on, Julius Hempel, was it Julius Hempel, the tune?
no, oh God, it was a sax player who was not on the gig, but that you had worked with, I think.
It was a tune by a sax player that wasn't on the gig, but I had worked with.
I think so. And I remember going and buying the album because I really liked the tune at the time. So I have what the hell's the guy's name? I feel like the name of the tune had something to do with, I was going to say Lift Off or like something to do with
Thomas Chapin.
Thomas Chapin, yeah.
Yeah, I never worked with him. I'd love to have worked with him.
Right. What's the tune I'm thinking of? Is it called
Lift Off? Yeah, it's called Lift Off. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I did it on my Trio Red album.
Right, okay. I remember hearing you doing that tune on that night with all wearing a single orange ear, and and that having an impact on me and me searching out that album at the time. And
yeah, he was amazing. He died really young, and in fact, when I did the cover on the album, I contacted his widow, who's trying to keep his music alive. Okay. And he was this guy because he kind of was in the free scene and the jazz scene in New York when I went to New York when I was about 21, you know. So I was listening to the radio the whole time, and the people that stood out for me were him and Jerry Allen. Okay. That was like 88, and but the only thing I was going to say was first of all, probably the reason why the younger team, of which I'm the current representative, didn't seem so open, is because we were all probably shitting ourselves that we weren't good enough. So that's
yeah, I know. There's always two sides. That's kind of what I was trying to say. Is like there's always like even though I play with a lot of the current younger players, and if we do play, they're always like great, and I know that they check out the stuff that I'm doing with electronics and all that stuff, and they're into it, and I've collaborated with them on it. But I'm still not part of that scene because I'm older and I didn't grow up with them, and
that's cool. I
don't hang out around the flats every night.
That's should be. People should be in their gangs and all that stuff. But the Fionna Duncan Ronnie Ray thing, I just want to tell you a story like before we go. Is that about a couple of years? It's only a couple of years ago. The first gig that Ronnie and Fionna came to see after lockdown was a gig I did with John Burgess and Roy Percy, and I was sort of doing this New Orleans thing, and I'd been really getting into earlier New Orleans jazz drumming and stuff. And I said, "You come out to the gig," and they came out to the gig, and they got COVID, of course.
Okay.
They both got COVID, which was a total disaster, but they kind of coped with that. But I think they hated the gig. They didn't really like the gig. And there was this point where Ronnie went, Fionna gave up singing for like 7 years, and afterwards she was way better singer. So maybe you should think about that. And I was going, are you saying that you're suggesting at this point in my career is that I stopped playing for 7 years? No. Just whatever you think. I think it's going quite well at the moment, Ronnie. You saw one gig and like, okay, fair enough. It might not have been totally to your pleasing, but as far as I'm concerned, things are going okay. And I think I'm playing as well as I've ever played. So I think I should keep going. But if you're really seriously suggesting that I should just stop playing, but the thing is about those guys is that they were just totally support. They were into young players and listening to them and giving them,
Yeah. But I also so many times on a gig with Ronnie, he would turn around and give on stage advice. sometimes really bluntly to people.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah. There's no. I remember one time asking him like quite early on, so Ronnie, how do you play time? Like, so he went, bottle, son. It's all about bottle. That was it.
Yeah.
Bottle. Okay. Anyway, listen, man.
Yeah.
It's been fucking great talking to you. And we'll keep talking before the gig. I'm looking forward to it so much.
All right.
All right,
Nice.
Stu Brown. I'll see you in a
Thanks for
couple
the
of weeks,
chat.
man.
Catch you soon.
All right, thanks a lot, man. Good.
Bye.
See you soon. So thank you, Stu Brown, for that interview. That was wonderful. And we're going to finish now with a piece of Playtime improvising with the amazing Laura Jurd. She was in a flat in London. She was using a mute to not annoy her neighbours. We were all in our houses. We didn't know what we were doing. We were like on the bleeding edge of some kind of experimental, during lockdown, trying to make music happen thing. And miraculously, this is what happened. See you next time.
Thank you.